And good evening, everybody. Welcome to this wonderful event this evening. I'm Tom Hall. I am the host of Midday on WYPR Radio. And like you, I am a big fan of Marvin Pinkert. And I am delighted to be with you this evening and delighted that you could all join us to celebrate the great legacy that Marvin leaves as he leaves the Jewish Museum of Maryland. Marvin, of course, is incredibly impressive for his erudition, for his expansive knowledge, for what he knows. But he's also just extraordinary in terms of how he talks about it and how he communicates and how he shares his enthusiasm and shares that erudition with all of us. And he has done so beautifully in this tenure at the Jewish Museum of Maryland. And I must say that the great experiences I've had at the museum and the great times that I've had interviewing Marvin on WYPR, he is also responsible for one of the great moments of my life. And I'm going to take just a second to tell you about that moment, because were it not for Marvin, it wouldn't have happened, and I'll never forget it. But I was at the museum one day interviewing Marvin, and I got there around 11 o'clock, and we talked for about a half an hour or 45 minutes or so. And when we finished up, I left the museum, and as I always do when I go to the museum, and as I try to do many other times, even when I'm not headed directly to the museum, I went to Atman's. So I put my stuff in the car and I walk into Atman's, and I saw something I have never seen before, and I'm sure will never see since, and that is no line at the counter at Atman's. And the lady behind the counter said, "Honey, it must be your birthday, because there's no line and I can take your order." And if I hadn't been talking to Marvin Pinkert that day, I would not have had that incredible experience that I'm sure almost no one has had, because there's always a line at Atman's, and it's deserved. So Marvin, of the many things that I'm grateful to you for all of the great contributions you've made to the arts community and to the Jewish Museum itself and to the Jewish and the greater community in town, I'm also grateful that I was able to have the experience of being not just first in line at Atman's, but the only one in line at Atman's. So I appreciate that. Now, folks, we do have one small technical note. There is real-time captioning available throughout the program tonight. So to get to the captions, you want to click on the close caption, the CC button. For most of us, it's at the bottom of the screen. Sometimes you have those three little dots over the word more, and where it says show subtitle, that'll work as well. So if you want to have the captioning on, you can just do that, click that, and you can see the closed captioning. You can even have them separated from the screen. So we want to just make sure that if you want the closed captioning, you can do that very easily. Sometimes it's at the top of your screen, sometimes it's at the bottom. It's different on different devices, but closed captioning is available. So now, before we get underway, we want to begin with our guest of honor, and we want to ask Marvin to make some remarks and say hi. So Marvin, congratulations, thank you, and welcome.
Thank you, Tom. This is an extraordinary experience on my part. And I have to tell you, since I know nothing of what's going to happen tonight, I'm a little bit apprehensive, but my team is who I've always relied on, and they put this together with your help. And I'm confident that that combination is going to make it a great evening. But I'm also confident that I'm likely to get verklempt. So I've got my box of Kleenex, and I've been given permission by Trillian that until the game starts, I can go into hiding. And I will join the audience now and be back when the game begins later in the program.
All right, we look forward to seeing you then. And we do have a game planned for you. We have all sorts of stuff planned for you. We want to begin by welcoming Mark Terrell. He's the president of the Associated Jewish Federation of Baltimore, who has some words for Marvin.
Good evening. Tonight, Marvin is all about you. It's a celebration about your leadership, about your contribution, about the person you are. Often overused, but so apropos here, is that this is bittersweet. Bitter because we won't have the frequency of encounter with you. Sweet because we will have the daily reminders of your contribution and your legacy. and what you have brought to the museum and to this community. And also sweet, because you deserve this next chapter in your life, and hopefully it will be as rich and as successful as the last chapters. So tonight we celebrate you, Marvin, but we don't say goodbye. As in Hebrew, we say lahitraot, see you soon, because we're certainly not going to let you go, and you will always be part of the fabric of this community. Thank you for all that you've done and for wearing the crown of a good name well. Continue to wear that crown, and on behalf of a grateful community, the Associated, all of the agencies, and the community at large, thank you, Marvin, for just being an incredible niche. Well done.
Thank you, Mark. That's terrific. So what we're going to do tonight is do a little recap of some of the great achievements that Marvin has accomplished in his time at the JMM. So we're going to celebrate some of those key achievements, and we're going to start with the historic neighborhood in which the museum is situated, Jonestown. So if you're not familiar with Jonestown, in order to get you familiar, we're going to give you a song, and it's a song by Marvin himself, as a matter of fact. And before we get to that song, though, actually, there is one other thing that I want to do, and I'm noticing it now, so it's my bad. I apologize. I almost missed it, but we're going to get to the song and talk about Jonestown in just a second. But first, having heard from Mark, Marvin, we're going to hear also from Saul Davis, who is your successor as the executive director of the Jewish Museum. And he's written a letter which goes as follows. Dear Marvin, if all goes well, I will be arriving in Baltimore by car with my family this evening. And I am sorry that I'm unable to join you to share in this celebration of all that you've accomplished during your tenure as executive director at the Jewish Museum. One of my favorite books, the Haggakur, which is kind of a handbook and philosophical guide for Sumares, states that equal attention must be given to the beginning and the end of all things. So I'm thinking of that piece of ancient guidance as I admire and appreciate the great care that you have taken in coordinating the transition of leadership at the JMM. You have given tremendous thought and attention to all the details of ending your tenure and setting me up for a successful beginning with mine. So thank you for the care that you've taken in your leadership of this museum. Wishing you rest, joy, and peace in your retirement, Saul. So that's from Saul Davis, who has the big shoes of Marvin Pinkert to fill when he assumes the leadership of the JMM. So as I mentioned a second ago, we're going to talk about some of these great achievements that Marvin has accomplished in his tenure here. We're going to start with the neighborhood itself, Jonestown, an historic neighborhood, and of course the Jewish Museum, such a fundament as that neighborhood. Now, a fundament in that neighborhood. So Marvin wrote a song. As you know, that the thing that Marvin loves perhaps almost as much as he loves museums is musicals. And in 2019, there was a Jonestown Festival, and the theme of it was Hamilton, the great Broadway show by Lin-Manuel Miranda. So Marvin, of course, loves, as I said, musicals and museums, and he's written a bit of a song called The Place Where It Happened, a parody from Hamilton to let us know about Jonestown from Marvin.
Miss Mary, did you hear?
What, Mr. Carey?
Jefferson and Adams died the same day.
No.
It was the 4th of July.
Don't say.
That makes me the senior signer of our sacred declaration.
My word.
And all I had to do was keep on living here in Jonestown. I'm living in the rooms where it happened, the rooms where it happened, the place where it happened. After a fight for religious toleration and fortunes made mostly from incarceration, I retired from Annapolis to go and live where the commerce is. Right here in the room where it happened. the place where it happened. Mr. Carroll, sir, I don't mean to knock, but you're not the only patriot on this block. Before you signed the Declaration paper, Mom was already General George's draper. So when the flag for the Continentals, I followed her line with the regimentals who wanted a flag to show our credentials to fly high. The flag I started in the rooms where it happened, the rooms where it happened, the place where it happened. Our business started and run by a woman in the rooms where it happened, the place where it happened. And when the Redcoats tried to take our town, they couldn't miss the banner I'd sewn. The colors made in the rooms where it happened, the place where it happened. Yo, neighbors.
Is that Congressman McKim? I wish that they would let me vote for him.
I'm Isaac McKim, congressman. I'm a Quaker and a shaker and a policymaker. Born in the city of Baltimore, going to a public school, I learned the score. So when I had the dough, I made the decision to build a school free from tuition. The McKim School, right here. Educating in the rooms where it happened, the rooms where it happened, the place where it happened. Founded the first free public school in Maryland, in the rooms where it happened, the place where it happened. Catholics and Quakers and Christians galore. Is there room in this town for one more? Don't worry, Charles, the kids will be a success. They'll be leading this nation and its progress. Let me introduce myself and give you some advice. You're speaking to Reverend Abraham Rice. You can call me Rev, you can call me Reba, but I'm the first Jewish minister in Maryland, Bubby. Just arrived from the land of Bavaria to help my people overcome a barrier, keeping the faith, keeping it true, becoming an American but remaining a Jew. We built this temple on Watson and Lloyd to hold us together, stay out of the void. Just in case it wasn't clear that we were here, we put the Star of David on our exterior. What star? Which star? Where star? That star. The oldest Star of David on a synagogue exterior anywhere in America. Right here in the rooms where it happened, the rooms where it happened, the place where it happened. A star to point the way in the rooms where it happened, the rooms where it happened, the place where it happened. Excuse me, Rev, but you're missing a voice. We followed the stars, but we were given no choice. Torn out of Africa and strapped with a chain, they stole our labor and they stole our name. On this corner we were bought and sold, but for years our story was seldom told. Though this is the place where it happened, the place where it happened, the street where it happened. We work to build a city, work to be free. We work to achieve, though few achieve like me. I'm Reggie Lewis and I came from Baltimore. Made it up to Harvard with $50, no more. Became a lawyer, an investor, and soared. Soon was the owner of a major food business and turned my thoughts onto how to really win this, to return to the community a piece of our legacy. And so I laid the foundation to restore our identity on the ruins of the site that recalls the obscenity, the Reginald F. Lewis Museum here in Jonestown. Jonestown is the place where it happened.
All right. The place where it happened, with the lyrics by our very own Marvin Pinkham. Pinkert. For those of you, I hope everybody could see all of those wonderful pictures and stuff. Sometimes the screen shares don't work perfectly, but it was just terrific. And to have Marvin incorporate all of that great stuff that's happened in this very neighborhood where the JMM is. So now we want to talk about we want to hear from some of the individuals who have worked with Marvin as Jonestown has grown. So here are some of the folks that have worked closely with Marvin to make the neighborhood flourish the way it has over the past 8.5 years.
I'm Lindsay Thompson, and I've been a resident of Jonestown for 15, going on 16 years. And I am just one of the biggest, most ardent fans of Marvin that you could ever imagine. I remember when Marvin first came to Jonestown, and he was the new head of the Jewish Museum. And we were just kind of getting Historic Jonestown organized, the Historic Jonestown Corporation, and trying to figure out what to do and how to put Jonestown back on the map as a historic place that it has always been. And this identity was not exactly clear and kind of fuzzy. And Marvin just was this visionary, prophetic presence. And he came and in his quiet, gentle way, really inspired us to create this plan, a master plan for Jonestown. And he got it organized, really supported us and encouraged us through the entire process. And it is our master plan for historic Jonestown. And the thing that is so impressive about Marvin, aside from, his great knowledge and expertise, is he really has an insight into how connected we are as human beings, and how the experience of the other is really a reflection of our own experience if we dig into it. And so his genius about Jonestown as a place for healing relationships, for finding ourselves in each other, and especially at a time like now, from Freddie Gray until now, when we're so conscious of divisions, Marvin is the kind of person who absolutely compels us to find ourselves in each other and to reach out to one another and to embrace one another in our common humanity. And this is what I will always remember about Marvin and his gift of presence and prophetic vision to historic Jonestown and to me. I am personally so grateful that I have known and loved Marvin ever since he came here.
In 2014, my firm began working with Marvin and the Jewish Museum on a vision plan for the Jonestown neighborhood. Throughout a 12-month planning process, we, together with Marvin and his team, engaged more than 44 stakeholder groups, 100 individuals, elected leaders, and public agencies. This collaborative effort led to a plan focusing not only on the Jewish Museum, but also on the entirety of Jonestown, including organizations, programs, and operations, community identity, development, and the public realm. Working with Marvin on this project was a real treat. He understood and said often throughout the planning process that the museum would only be as strong as the community that surrounds it. That kind of broad and connected perspective can be lost on directors of institutions who have to manage what are often narrowly defined organizational missions. However, Marvin rose above that and helped our team and the entire Jonestown community develop a master plan that unified a neighborhood and lifted up the Jewish Museum as a visionary leader in Baltimore City. Marvin's ability to see the world broadly and the relationships between people and places was part of his gift as a storyteller, which was also one of the great treats of working with him. Whenever he had an idea or relayed a story, you could see the Cheshire grin come across his face and the sparkle in his eye. It was a true joy to work with Marvin, and the Jewish Museum will miss him, as will Jonestown, and so will I. But the seeds we planted together are and will continue to bear fruit, which is a testament to his enduring leadership and vision. We wish him all the best on his journey ahead. Thank you, Marvin.
And thank you, Isaac and Lindsay. We very much appreciate that. Isaac mentioned this master plan. It has been accepted by the city, and Jonestown has continued to go from strength to strength. There are new neighbors of the JMM, including the Ronald McDonald House, National Aquarium, and of course the Jonestown Festival continues to thrive. So the plan is in place, and Marvin, of course, played a pivotal role in making sure that that's the case. We want to now talk about part of Marvin's achievement that Marvin is particularly associated with and very involved in, and that's, of course, the great exhibits that have been at the JMM since Marvin took over. He is very passionate about the exhibits that the museum is able to develop. He is a key part most of the time of the planning teams for these exhibits. So we want to sort of focus about some of those key exhibits that have been developed by the Jewish Museum over the past 8.5 years. And one of the most popular exhibits, I know I had a great time talking to Marvin about it on WYPR. It wasn't actually developed by the JMM team, but it was devoted to Paul Simon, the great songwriter, singer-songwriter, and musician. Of course, we're all familiar with his great classic Graceland. So here's another parody. This is Exhibitland, to talk about the exhibits.
JMM exhibit was ready to be installed. Marvin asked, is there a preview, and can we add a paragraph of text to the wall? He's going to the exhibit, once again to see, he's going to the exhibit. Interactive timelines, it's multi-sensory, he is in the exhibit. Marvin came up with a catchy name, there's a hands-on game. While there's no Patinkin or Bickel, it will be received well. The exhibit.
Exhibitland, that's terrific. We now want to hear from several of the curators that Marvin has worked with during his time here at the Jewish Museum.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Fernandi with Minotaur Mazes, and I'm delighted to join in toasting Marvin's illustrious career. A fun bit of trivia, Marvin and I both started our current careers in 1988, and of those 32 years, I've had the pleasure of knowing Marvin for more than 25 of them. And while we've only worked together a few times, those projects stand out as some of the most memorable and fun, and in each case, I learned a lot. First, I'd like to share why I love working with Marvin. Marvin approaches each exhibit with a childlike exuberance. He delights in each subject and is flooded with ideas and connections of how these stories can be made accessible and relevant. He has a laser focus that cuts through dense research materials and finds threads and key pieces to the puzzle. As a director, he isn't one to merely organize and delegate. He dives in, sleeves rolled up, and joins in the heavy lifting. He is smart, obviously, but also humble, dedicated, and exceedingly loyal. He also has an impish, devilish quality that peeks through, letting you know he's seeing all sides of a situation and enjoying himself as he deftly navigates the most interesting course. In this way, he reminds me of the gentleman that brought us together for our most in-depth work. The amazing Mendes Cohen. It was Mendes' momentous life choices that inspired Marvin to present his story in a maze. And although we at Minotaur had never done a biographical exhibit before, I was drawn to both Mendes' story and the opportunity to work with Marvin and his team. And I'm so glad that I did. I had a blast working on this exhibit, and I learned an incredible amount. If you're not familiar with it, the experience takes place in a 1,700 square foot maze. The journey takes you through an inner loop, reviewing major events of 19th century history that begins with your arrival in the burgeoning city of Baltimore. If there was one thing from this exhibit that speaks to Marvin's dogged dedication, it was his creation of this timeline panel, which portrays the connectivity of global, national, and local history during Mendes' lifetime spanning 80 years. After you complete the inner loop, setting your journey in time, you proceed to the outer loop, following the path of the Cohen family, Mendes' own life, and his world travels. A nifty feature of these concentric loops is the ability to include windows between the two, allowing you to track what's happening on the national and world stages as you traverse Mendes' life path, and vice versa. Marvin knew that presenting an exhibit in a maze lets you direct flow, present information sequentially, and add rooms and displays as needed. One highlight for me, this was my first artifact-based exhibit, and it introduced me to a new universe. What do you mean I can't enter the exhibit gallery while the conservators are doing their work? In addition to Marvin's clear passion for these historical treasures, I got to observe talented curators, researchers, and educators, collections and program managers, weaving these objects and their stories into our maze environment, creating a truly unique and memorable exhibit experience. As Marvin intended, the maze allows us to present Mendy's life choices. Here, the choice that Mendy's made to defend Baltimore sends you down the left path. The alternate option leads you to the right, down a dead end, suggesting perilous consequences and possible death. In this way, we follow Mendy's footsteps as a patriot, meeting dangerous challenges with heroic deeds and dodging death, sometimes by inches. As a businessman, building wealth and making a mark on his city. As an adventurer, traveling the world, keeping meticulous journals, and staying in touch. Exploring his Jewish roots, collecting exotic treasures, displaying his national pride, and returning home, where visitors could piece together his identity and their own. The amazing Mendy's Cohen was honored with an Award of Merit from the American Association of State and Local History Museums, in large part due to the passion and efforts of this man. I raise a toast, a hearty thanks, and not a small amount of praise to the amazing Marvin Pinkert.
Hi, Marvin. David London here. What a strange time to be alive. And as I can only imagine, an equally strange time to be retiring. But life is a funny thing and unfolds in ways we could never predict. You know, I've spent my life obsessed with the unexpected, and meeting you was just as unexpected as the changes that working together would bring to my life. For you, the day we met may have been filled with angst about your recently canceled show or the desire to escape the annual heat of Artscape. But for me, it was just another day, another show, another opportunity to share my magic with the world. Little did either of us know that we would soon be embarking on a strange and wonderful journey to bring Harry Houdini back to Baltimore and back to life. On that hot July day, I couldn't have imagined that in just a few months I would be traveling around the country, beholding some of the greatest magic collections in the world. Or that I would be talking to descendants of Eric Weiss or his rabbi, or that I would be finding new ways to connect to my Jewish heritage through the eyes of Harry Houdini, of all people. But your impact on my life was not just a momentary passion for a childhood hero or a fun, interesting, or challenging project, though it was all of those things. But more importantly, as a lifelong storyteller, you made me realize that museums are the most interesting places to tell stories. And accordingly, you brought about a radical shift in my career with my entrance into the museum business. Great stories are a dime a dozen, but having the vision, the leadership, and the team to bring them to life is something truly special, and I will never forget the lessons that I learned from you. For years, my life has been guided by a single question: what is magic? And while I don't believe there's any right answer, for myself, I've settled on a simple but encompassing definition: that magic is the expansion of possibilities. And working with you and your incredible team not only brought magic and dreams and possibilities to my life, but to visitors in Baltimore and Atlanta and Milwaukee and who knows where else. I specifically remember our many lengthy discussions about whether we could actually host the official Houdini seance in the museum, thereby carrying on a tradition started by Bess Houdini herself. We talked about whether it would be ethical or acceptable to attempt to raise spirits inside of an institution with deep connections to religion. And while we may not have contacted Houdini on that Halloween night in 2018, only now, years later, do I fully understand that together we enlivened so many spirits. not only capturing and presenting the spirit of Houdini, but raising the spirits of every single person who walked through the doors of the museum. A big part of the expansion of possibilities of magic itself is rejecting the notion of the impossible. And while many people would have thought that to pull off inescapable in the time that we had was an impossible task, you and me didn't. You may have sought my expertise because I'm a magician, but today I'm here to tell you, Marvin, that you are a wizard. You have an incredible understanding of what the public wants and needs, and the ability to make truly incredible and impossible things come to life. Houdini's greatest gift was his ability to amaze, inspire, and help people dream of new possibilities. And if I really look at it, that's what you do as well. You believe in impossible things and find ways to make them real. And you believed in me, for which I will be eternally grateful. The only thing I'm certain of in this increasingly chaotic world is that magic is real and that life is one great adventure. And so, as you move on to the next part of your life, of your adventure, my wish for you is that you continue to see the magic all around you and that you never, ever stop believing in impossible things.
I'm Joanna Church, Director of Collections and Exhibits at the JMM. I've been here for 6 years now. And while I've curated several exhibits start to finish here at the JMM, I'm also the one who works with Marvin when we borrow exhibits that other museums have created. And that is where I find he really shines. He can take an obscure topic from some other museum that doesn't seem like it would make a whole lot of sense to be shown in Maryland, and he makes it work. The Paul Simon exhibit, nothing to do with Maryland really, but by adding a lobby exhibit that he did all the Googling for and all the research and all the writing, he made it work. A small exhibit like Space seemed like it would be too small for our nice 1850 square foot gallery, and Marvin knew that the Hubble was based in Maryland and we had to include it. So he found that hook to make it about Maryland, to keep it within the realm of interest to our audience, keep it within the tone of the exhibit itself, and fill our beautiful gallery. As you can see, we have ended up with a gigantic picture of the Hubble behind me, which is amazing. He knows what the show should look like. He knows how the flow should be. When one of us would come to him and like, we could do it like this, and he gets a look on his face, he's like, oh, we're not doing it like that. Okay, great. And he has a suggestion, and at first sometimes we're like, what? No. But no, he's almost always right. It works. We should do it the way Marvin knows will be the best fit for the gallery, for our audiences, and for the museum. So I've made many exhibits throughout my time. In my old job, we did a lot of exhibits, and I was the only one working on them. When I got to the JMM, I was very excited that I'd be able to work on exhibits, much bigger, grander exhibits, but there are some things I'm just don't have a lot of practice in, not very good at, like titles. I don't do brief, cute, clever, interesting titles very well, and I'm not always very good at coming up with interactives that anyone but me would want to use. And Marvin knows how to do that, so it really was great to come into this team with a director who cares passionately about the exhibits, knows that they're a vital part of the museum, and was willing to dive in and use his own expertise. If you need a title, Marvin is your guy, and if you need an interactive, Marvin is your guy. He will know how to figure out how to make it work. It will be a little elaborate, sometimes you have to bring it back, but it's an interactive that people will want to play. When we ended up with Space, and we weren't able to have as many hands-on things as we originally intended, the touchless musical instrument that makes space noises, the theremin, was Marvin's idea, and I love that that's the thing we can end on.
My name is Zachary Paul Levine, and I have been working with Marvin since 2016, when he invited me to help with a brand new project all about scrap recycling in America. And when I talked to Marvin about it, he said, well, I have this small project. It's really just working on a grant. Not sure if you know much about it, but it might be some interest. That conversation opened the door to what was and what has become one of the most interesting relationships that I've had in the museum world over my career so far. It really was one where, and I think that this is very much Marvin's style, he just put a little nugget of an idea out there, scrap recycling, scrap, and said, why don't you go and explore a little bit and see what you come back with? And so I probably spent, a week or two reading some books in some archives and so on, and learning about this area, this field that I had really no idea about, and seeing very, very quickly what Marvin saw in it, that there was something in this story that was all about, it wasn't about, taking an old can and making it into a new can. It was about the history of America, the history of becoming American, the whole story of human existence, in fact, with how we interact with material culture and with the material around us. It was absolutely incredible. And then as we worked together on the exhibit over the following 3 years, I could see, again, the way that Marvin's unique perspective and unique approach to creativity really made this into, for me, a very special experience. It wasn't, we're going to look at this topic from its earliest story to its latest. We're going to do it chronologically. We're not going to do it according to sort of traditional themes of, who worked in the scrapyard? What did they do? What tools did they use? I mean, that was in there. But instead, he said, you know what? Let's think about this as the processes that go on in the scrapyard. And let's organize the entire exhibit that way, where, if you sort of think about it at first, it's like, well, this makes no sense. This is overwhelming. It doesn't, how is anybody going to work in there? But actually, it made perfect sense, because what it meant is you could actually get into this exhibit, and based on Marvin's ideas, you could start to feel it in your bones. You could start to actually understand, not just on an intellectual level, but on an emotional level, on a true experiential level, what the story was and how you wanted to get there. And so by the time that the exhibition opened, I felt that I had been pushed, and not in any type of way. I'd been pushed just by gentle nudges, and that's how it's been like to work with Marvin. Just some gentle nudges in one direction or another to create something, and to have a hand in creating something that I could never have imagined would have been so interesting and so rich and so deep. The other thing I'll say about Marvin is that he has been incredibly important in my life and in my career. I was leaving a museum job, or wanted to leave a museum job, and not really knowing Marvin, I sent him a note and asked if he had some words of wisdom. And I think it was a matter of an hour or two that he got on the phone with me and provided both the personal connection that I needed, being a young professional in a position that wasn't really working out, to understanding that, maybe he had a way to help me out. I think he'd been there before and really wanted to help a colleague. And from there, it opened an entire door to thinking very differently about museum work, feeling like it was okay to be challenged and to challenge others, to create, go on big flights of fancy with museum exhibitions and museum programs, to the point where I just kept saying to myself, I want to be around this person, and I want to keep working with this person. And so when I think about Marvin, and I think about our time working together, and the impact that he's had, not just on JMM and not just on Jewish museums, but on the museum world in general, I think about one of the most incredible, talented, and critical people who's been in the field probably in a generation.
Isn't that great? Well, thank you so much. Great to hear from Kelly and from David and Joanna and Zachary. It really is quite something to think of the impact and the influence and the legacy that Marvin has in the museum world, not just with this incredible scope of exhibitions, this incredible intellectual curiosity and imagination. to learn about the great individuals, the Mendes Cohens and the Harry Houdinis and the Paul Simons of the world, but also to go from the terra firma of recycling to outer space. Just the depth of it is quite something. And as Zachary was mentioning, I'm sure there are many, many more museum professionals who are grateful and indebted to Marvin for the help that he's given them over the course of their careers. A great resource for everybody in and out of the museum business. So we have now heard then from some of Marvin's colleagues and heard the great esteem in which he is held by them. And just a minute now, we're going to hear from Marvin himself, and we're going to have a little quiz, a little game that Marvin will be able to preside over. Before we talk to Marvin about that, though, I do want to hand it over to Trillian, who has another announcement about what we're up to later in the program.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Tom. And thank you so much. You're pulling this together in the most amazing way. So thank you. So I am going to wait for a note from my colleague, Laura Grant, who's going to tell me when we have put Marvin into a waiting room. It seems very odd that we are turning off all audio for my boss in the middle of his retirement program, but there we have it. Okay, so he's in. So very quickly, recognizing that we are in this very confusing virtual world, and the one thing that I feel confident that had I been able to plan this event to take place at the museum, we would have done was somehow give Marvin a standing ovation. And so I am hoping to break all of my own Zoom rules and ask all of you if you would like to join us in a standing ovation. Laura and myself will be doing the tech on the back end for you. You'll just need to follow the prompts when they come up. We'll play a video shortly with our board president, Nancy Cutler, and that's when you'll get those prompts popping up on your screen. It is a surprise for Marvin, please don't tell him. If you want to participate in that though, the thing I need to ask you to do is use your raise hand feature. So that should be at the bottom of the screen for you. Perfect, perfect. I see the numbers going up already. Brilliant. So no, those of you that are raising your hands, you will get a request to turn on your video and, well, so you're going to request to become a panelist and then to turn on your video a little bit later. Oh my goodness, lots of raised hands. So just know that's coming. The other tiny note I just wanted to share while Marvin is out of the room, as it were, is if you are leaving early or just generally when you leave, you'll be directed to something called a kudos board. It's a place where if you'd like to leave a note for Marvin, share a memory, just wish him well, you can easily drop a comment on there. And we'll make sure he has access to that and he can see all of the well wishes that you would like to share with him. We've seen a couple of those in the chat, so I wanted to make sure we let everyone know sooner rather than later. So I think with that, Laura, can you please let Marvin back out of the waiting room and we will jump on with the game, if that's okay. Thank you.
All right, Marvin, well, welcome back. We hear that there you are. Good to have you back. So we have a little quiz for you. I will pose questions. You will answer, and Trillian, the tech genius that she is, will collate and figure out what the majority of the audience thinks the right answer is. And then we will pose that hypothesis to Marvin, who will either concur or set us straight. So let's start with the very first question, which I think you'll be able to see on your screen. I can't see it, but I have them written down, so I'm gonna.
It's coming. There we go.
There we go. Okay. So, who is this that Marvin took on a visit to the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago? Is it Rabbi Rice, Jonas Friedenwald, Mendes Cohen, or Mandy Patinkin? What do you think? Is it Rabbi Rice? Is it Jonas Friedenwald, Mendes Cohen, or Mandy Patinkin?
So it's Jonas Friedenwald, which is misspelled.
Sorry. Oh, sorry.
All right,
okay.
so Trillian, what did the audience think?
Okay, so I'm going to wrap up the polling for everyone. It's so interesting. We have a even split between two answers: Mendes Cohen or Mandy Patinkin have an equal split. 40 members of the audience voted for each of those.
All right, so Marvin, what's the correct answer? Who did you take?
The correct answer is that I took the Traveling Mendes. That's the little character you see, which we created, and we had Mendes show up in all sorts of places around the country. And so that's what's portrayed in the drawing.
All right, there you go. And I understand we have a little bit of a typo with Jonas Friedenwald.
Yes, I'm afraid so. It's okay. As my wife points out, he's dead.
And you know, that's true. You can't argue with that. Okay, so now the second question is, you are looking in your closet and you are deciding what to wear for a virtual presentation at Balticon. That's the Baltimore Science Fiction Society's annual convention. So what do you decide to wear to Balticon? Do you decide to wear A, a nice suit, B, a Star Trek costume, C, a button-down shirt with a witty tie and jogging bottoms? So, you know, hey, you can only see from the waist up. Or Mandy Patinkin. So you're going to Balticon. What are you going to wear? A suit, a Star Trek costume, a button-down shirt with a witty tie and Lord knows what underneath, and Mandy Patinkin. Always an option, it seems. So Jillian, what does our poll say?
I'm going to end the polling again. So, okay, we have 62 members of the audience went with Star Trek costume. 28, though, did go with the button-down shirt, witty tie, and jogging bottoms.
I'm not even sure what jogging bottoms are.
Oh, did I use a very English phrase?
But it was indeed a Star Trek uniform.
So you dressed up in a Star Trek uniform?
Yes, I've done it several times over the last year as we've gone into this exhibit. It was made for me for an exhibit that we did on Star Trek Federation Science at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. So I brought it back.
Fantastic. All right, well then many folks were able to deduce that and figure that out. All right, so let's go to the third question. You are about to open a borrowed exhibit all about the great Paul Simon. And for a fun marketing concept, you decide to do what? You decide to, one, put a gigantic inflatable guitar on the roof of the JMM, or advertise in all of the local music stores, ask all Baltimore buskers to sing songs by Paul Simon for a month, or Mandy Patinkin.
Stupid.
So, as a way of getting the word out about the Paul Simon exhibit, which I know many of us remember quite fondly, for a fun marketing concept, if you're Marvin Pinkert, you put a giant inflatable guitar on the roof of the museum, you advertise in all the local music stores, you ask all the buskers, those folks who play in like the Inner Harbor and places, to sing songs by Paul Simon for an entire month, or Mandy Patinkin. Why not? So Trillian, what do we think?
So, it looks like our audience might remember this one. 72 members of the audience have selected putting a giant inflatable guitar on the roof of the museum.
And they're absolutely right, but it's probably only because I didn't think about asking buskers to sing Paul Simon songs.
Well,
Sorry,
you know,
Marvin.
sometimes great ideas come a little late, you know, but it's
Yeah.
okay. No, I remember that the inflatable guitar. That was a lot of fun. Okay, so now, Artscape. Once again, Artscape has been scheduled for the hottest day of the year. It seems like that happens a lot. So what do? You A, just give up and go home. B, you find a drink and try to ignore the heat. C, you find a nice air-conditioned theater and you make friends with a magician. Always an option when it's hot outside. Or D, of course, the ever-present Mandy Patinkin.
So looks like we've got a really fast response on this one on the polls already. And the number is only going up. We're at 84 members of the audience have already guessed that you may have found a nice air-conditioned theatre and made friends with a magician.
Well, if you're listening to David London a moment ago, you would have discovered that already. So it is indeed true.
All right. Your newest exhibit, called Zap Pow Bam, celebrates the Jewish artists and writers behind the creation of some of the most loved superheroes. So, what program is an essential part of this exhibit? A, Superman's bar mitzvah, Wonder Woman's Purim party, Batman's Sukkah building contest, or Mandy Patinkin? All right, your biggest exhibit, your newest exhibit rather, Zap Pow Bam, the Jewish artists and writers who were behind the creation of some of the most loved superheroes on Earth or out of the Earth, wherever they are. So what program is essential? The Bar Mitzvah for Superman, the Purim party for Wonder Woman, the Sukkah building contest for Batman, or never forget, Mandy Patinkin. What do you think, Trillian? What are our audience saying?
So, little more divided on this one, but 57 members of the audience have still gone for Superman's bar mitzvah. Marvin?
That is indeed the case. And as Trillian well remembers, we almost had no Superman that day. And it was only Deborah Carden's husband who saved the day for us.
So Superman, was he out fighting crime and he didn't show up for his own bar mitzvah?
It's a long story.
Yeah, I bet it is. All right.
Okay.
Now.
Let's. Oh. Yes.
We're going there? Okay.
Yeah, let's do this one.
All right. So your team
Last
has
one.
told you that you can only have one of the below in your next project. One. You got to choose one. Who do you select? Mandy Patinkin, Theodore Bickel, Leonard Nimoy, or Mandy Patinkin and Theodore Bickel? Again, your team has told you you can only have one of the below in the next project. Is it Mandy Patinkin, Theodore Bickel, Leonard Nimoy, or both Mandy Patinkin and Theodore Bickel? Audience, what do you think?
Give everyone one more second. This one looks like it's taking a bit more thought. Okay, let's wrap it up now. Okay, so we have a winner just. 37 people went for Leonard Nimoy, and then it's almost exactly the same numbers between Mandy Patinkin or Mandy Patinkin and Theodore Bickel.
Well,
So, Marvin?
those who picked the last answer, Mandy Patinkin and Theodore Bickel, know me well. Because if somebody tells me I can only have one of something in an exhibit, I would spend the first 20 minutes arguing about why we should have two of them. So even if we had to exhume Theodore Bickel from his grave, I would figure out some way to get him into the exhibit.
And you can obviously be persuasive, Marvin, as everybody who knows you knows. Well, that's terrific. And thank you, audience, for your game skills and your participation in that fun game. So we're beginning to wrap things up now. We next want to hear from the board president of the Jewish Museum. Here's Nancy Cutler.
Us for this celebration of Marvin. It's my great pleasure to convey the thoughts, appreciation, and the utmost regard of our board of directors. I'm sure I speak for the entire board when I say that we feel so fortunate to have the benefit of Marvin's talent for the past 8 years. What we've heard so far this evening from so many friends and colleagues confirms what we have come to know and appreciate about Marvin. In my mind, all of the accolades boil down to the following 5 key qualities. The first, Marvin, is your creativity. Your ability to conceptualize exhibits and then bring them to fruition is remarkable. Sometimes it happens by accident, like it did with Houdini, and other times it's the result of a lifelong personal endeavor, such as Scrapyard. But no matter which way the exhibits evolve, the end result is always innovative and exciting. One of our board members, Roberta Greenstein, calls you the Walt Disney of the museum world, using your creativity, your imagination, and your enthusiasm to get people excited about the museums. Second is your ability to be the ultimate team builder, whether it's with your professional staff or the board or partners in the greater community. You always see the value of bringing people together to work for the greater good. And as a team leader, you find time to guide, share your knowledge, and encourage others. Third, you value partnerships that help strengthen the JMM. You were instrumental in developing the Jonestown Partnership, as well as partnerships with other entities in the city, in the Jewish community, and in the museum world. Under your watch, the role of the JMM has been enhanced exponentially. You have put the museum on a path of strength to which your successor, Saul Davis, will reap the benefits. The fourth quality is your selflessness. You are always thinking about others before thinking about yourself. It's very telling that what you wanted as a tribute was a way to ease the path for your successor to continue to produce exciting, innovative, and memorable exhibits. So we created the Marvin Pinkert Fund that will help kickstart creative projects in the coming decade. I'm thrilled to report that we've already raised over $65,000 from 128 donors, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. The good news is that the opportunity to contribute to this fund will extend to December 31st. So if there's anyone on this Zoom call who would like to do so, you may contribute in the next month. My last point is the most obvious. Marvin is the quintessential mensch, defined as, quote, someone to admire and emulate, someone of noble character, an extraordinarily good person. Marvin, we will miss all of these things about you, as well as your wit, your smile, and your very infectious laugh, or should I say giggle. We wish you good health and happiness in the next phase of your life, and whatever opportunities you choose to pursue, whether it's travel, family time, or just being Grandpa Pinky to Maddie, we wish you all the best. Thank you, Marvin, and thank you all for helping us give Marvin the send-off he has truly earned and deserves.
So now, Marvin, we really do wish we could be with you in person, but we can't. So tech team, what do you think? Are we ready? We have a little surprise for you, Marvin, here. That is a virtual version of what we would be doing if we were with you tonight at the JMM. So ladies and gentlemen, what do we think?
Mute yourself.
I
now.
did.
Oh.
I did. Congratulations.
Bravo, Marvin.
Bravo.
Congratulations. Way to go. Fantastic job.
Bravo, Marvin.
Oh, bravo. Bravo.
Bravo.
All right. We want to take a moment to recognize the donations that we've received so far. We want to hear a little bit more about your time at the JMM from members of your board.
Wow.
And I recall several years ago when Carol and I were receiving an award for for Israeli bonds when we were in Miami, and between us during the photo op was Ambassador Ron Dermer. So he turned to me and he asked me about the pin that I always wear. And of course I was wearing it then. And he being from Miami, he thought that the M was from Miami, and I immediately had to correct him and tell him that it was from Maryland. And interestingly, his wife was from Pikesville. So I had about 10 seconds to give my elevator speech. And I told him about the Houdini exhibit, at which point he turns to me and he goes, "Houdini was Jewish?" And at which point Carol turns to him quickly and says, "Houdini's father was a rabbi." So later I realized, Marvin, how much you taught me about the importance of museums in general, and especially the Jewish Museum of Maryland. So Marvin, I thank you for this. for being a friend and a colleague, and wish you only happiness and good health in your retirement. And please stay close both to me and to the museum.
Stitching History from the Holocaust was in Baltimore in 2019. What was special to me was that this Holocaust story was a universal story, and our goal is to help visitors make connections between their own lives and histories and the stories of others. When the Jewish Museum of Milwaukee curator came to install this exhibit, what struck me was a level of detail that went into creating the garments from sketches that Hedy Stranad, trying to escape Prague, said to her relatives in Milwaukee. These clothes were made by the Milwaukee Opera Theater, who researched and used antique zippers, buttons, created fabrics, mannequins, and paper wigs, all to bring these clothes to life. JMM's commitment to Holocaust education made this exhibit an important one. This exhibit aimed for visitors to see that each victim of the Holocaust has their own story that deserves to be remembered, and that the Holocaust took not just lives, but also the potential those lives had and their future contributions to our world.
Hi, I'm Toby Gordon. I've been on the board of the Jewish Museum since about 2010, and I am presently the co-chair of the Collections Committee with Sarah Lynn Glass. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed is learning so much from Marvin during the collections meetings, and it's just wonderful to be able to work with someone who has the same kind of passion for archives that I do. I have had a lot of memorable and meaningful moments with items that have been on display from our collections, and some in particular that came from my family and have very special meanings for me. In the Just Married exhibit, my wedding picture was on display, so that was really special to be able to take my family there to see it. And also in that exhibit, I had sheet music and records that I donated to the museum that were from my grandfather's collection. He was a cantor and apparently had a wonderful singing voice and wrote music. And some of that was also on display in the Just Married exhibit.
It was easy for me to select The Amazing Mendes Cohen as my favorite. That exhibit was the ultimate product that a museum like ours should present to its audience. It was educational in that it taught many about an amazing individual who was an American Jew from Baltimore in the early 19th century that few seemed to know about. It was the story about a Jew who had an incredible, almost unbelievable story. The tagline of the exhibit was, "Mendes was there," which reflected the wide range of travels, military experiences, and political life that Mendes experienced during his lifetime. On a more personal note, it was really a kick for me to see my husband Sheldon's medical equipment and white coat from his medical school days in the 50s in Beyond Chicken Soup, Jews in Medicine.
We would not have had the fortune on many levels if Marvin had not decided to take a stroll through Artscape to cheer himself up on a very hot day in July 2017. As he walked through Artscape, he judicially searched for a venue offering him a reprieve from the heat. Who ever thought that he would stumble upon a magic show being presented by the magician David London, which was the beginning of Marvin's inspiration? Marvin shared how he had remembered a college course where he heard that Houdini was the son of a rabbi and thought of the idea of a show about Jews and magic. Of course, none of this could have happened without Marvin asking David London to serve as the guest curator and David accepting. Thus, Marvin's personal motivation and inspiration resulted in the awesome, inescapable, the life and legacy of Harry Houdini, one of JMM's most successful exhibitions. It was truly Bashert and would not have happened if it wasn't for Marvin.
I'd like to talk briefly about my interaction with Marvin that convinced me that he was a player and that I was going to love working with him to make him successful at the Jewish Museum. I got a call from Deborah Carden at that time, who was in charge of onboarding for the board, in the summer of 2016. About that time, my wife, Eileen, she had put my name up for membership on the board, and that was accepted. And Deborah was calling me to put together a meeting for me to be onboarded to the board with her and Marvin. So I vividly remember an evening meeting. Deborah took out the binder and went through all of the details of what it meant to be a board member at the Jewish Museum. That was very straightforward, went well, and I thought that was the end of it. Until Marvin reached down to his briefcase on the floor and pulled out this massive binder and said, okay, now let me tell you what my vision is for the next few years of how we're going to turn the Jewish Museum into this block-wide campus over the course of several iterations. And he proceeded to spend about 20 minutes going over the details, operationally, vision, scope, real estate, footprint, neighborhood, every possible thing you could think of what it was going to take to get to the next level for the Jewish Museum of Maryland. And it was at that point that I realized that Marvin was the man. He had a vision, he had engagement, he had all the details lined up. He knew how to sell it. He knew how to engage me. And at that point, I really just looked at him at the eye and said, yes, sir, what can I do to make this happen?
Well, thanks to everybody who has made a contribution to the Marvin Pincott Innovation Fund. If you look on your chat screen, you'll see the link to make a donation if you haven't had a chance to do that yet. And as Nancy mentioned, donations to the fund can be accepted through the end of this month, through the 31st. So use that link to make a contribution to honor Marvin and to advance the great mission of this great museum for years to come. So Marvin, we, of course, because we are at the time of a global pandemic, an unprecedented time, we can't be with you again in person to hand you any kind of gift. But I think we're soon going to see some images coming up on the screen of something that is waiting for you in your office. So Marvin, help us understand why this is particularly significant for a guy like you.
Well, I have somewhat of a reputation for board games, and especially those that involve meeples. You notice the reference to meeple people. And for those of you who may have been wondering what a meeple was, this board game obviously has meeples in it. And it is just looks fantastic. And one of my favorite projects was working on the Scrapyard game, which made the whole exhibit worthwhile. And this is just fantastic.
Well, we know that you will
and we
enjoy
got
that.
Sue to play it. That's amazing.
Well, we all hope that you have many, many hours. We want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. We want to thank Trillian and Laura for all of their hard work and technical expertise, and Joe and everybody, making things work and go so swimmingly tonight. Again, if you want to share a story about Marvin or send Marvin a note to wish him well as he begins his retirement, at the end of our presentation, there's a kudo board. So please feel free to add something to the kudo board. But Marvin, before we go, we want to give you the last word, sir. Congratulations.
Okay.
Thank you on behalf of all of us. And let's ask you to finish our evening for us.
Well, thank you, Tom. And I did run through the whole box of Kleenex. Now you've given me two gifts to treasure: this lovely game and this memorable evening. You've almost left me speechless. The operative word in that sentence is almost. To prep for this moment, I spent part of my Thanksgiving weekend writing out a few words of thanks. I'm grateful that you've all allowed me to hear my eulogy while I'm still upright. And unlike my real eulogy, I have a chance to respond. I want to give a special shout out to you, Tom. You're one of the special talents that makes me proud to be part of Baltimore. And I want to thank all the staff, volunteers, board members, friends, colleagues who've joined me in this celebration of the work of the Jewish Museum of Maryland. There's been a lot of crazy talk tonight about what I did, but this is truly about what all of you did to push the museum forward over the last 8.5 years. I'm in your debt. I also want to express gratitude for the overwhelming response to the Exhibit Innovation Fund. I understand that since Nancy taped that segment, we're up to $68,000 and 140 contributors. And I'm grateful to each and every one of you for honoring me in the best way possible by contributing to an institution I love. I believe that my career offers proof to the proposition that passion can compensate for character flaws and deficits in wisdom. In my case, I've been animated by a passion for museums. My belief in the power of learning through experience remains as strong today as it was in September 1988 when I first went to work for Chicago's Museum of Science and Industry. Indeed, everything I've learned in the last 32 years, and with your help, the audience's help, I've learned a lot, has reinforced my convictions about the importance of museums and the other cultural sites in shaping our worldview, and through that mechanism, reshaping the world itself. Of course, as you've learned tonight, museums aren't my only passion. There's also family, board games, Star Trek, and the one most likely to lead to my demise, chocolate. But I'd like to close tonight with one other passion already mentioned, Broadway musicals. I hasten to point out that this isn't about singing Broadway musicals. Some of you may remember that last January's program, I revealed that my singing voice was so bad that the leader of the Rhode Physetic Choir asked me to go away in the same year that she made my cousin Mandy Patinkin the star. Nevertheless, since childhood, the lyrics of Gershwin, Hammerstein, and Yip Harburg, later joined by Sondheim, Schwartz, Lynn Ahrens, and Lin-Manuel Miranda, have played constantly in my head. I have on occasion inflicted this passion on the JMM staff, like the time I had everyone listen to a song about the 5 minutes before opening a show from the musical My Favorite Year, just before we opened Houdini. When starting a new project, I feel the optimism of a brand new day from The Wiz. And when the time comes to let a dear colleague depart, I often hear Stephen Schwartz's lyrics from Wicked. Who can say if I've been changed for the better, but I know I've been changed for good. So it should come as no surprise I have a lyric to match this moment. It comes from Sheldon Harnick's The Rothschilds. We have climbed higher, much higher than I thought we'd climb. It's a long journey, and even though the end's in sight, there's not much time. I want to know we haven't built on sand in my own lifetime. This Moses wants to see the promised land in my own lifetime. Wishing you all health and success in the years ahead. May we all see the promised land in our own lifetimes. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Marvin. Thanks to everybody who's been part of this wonderful evening. And thank you for all you have accomplished for our community, for this great museum, and for all you've done to advance the mission of this wonderful, wonderful institution. And, you know, as wonderful an artist as Mandy Patinkin is, I think we will all here in Baltimore remember him simply as Marvin's cousin. Have a great night, everybody.